We're back. We're back from the summer hiatus. Still kind of feeling crappy. But I miss you.
Yeah. It's been so long. I haven't known what to do.
And our audience is probably like,
are they dead?
I'm a filmmaker.
I'm a scientist.
And we're two friends who've made movies together.
And launched a company together.
And we lost our money.
And our identity.
But we are finding ourselves again.
And this is our podcast.
This is it.
Welcome.
After a busy summer, we're back in the saddle with episode 15.
And I wish we could say it was a provocative exploration of compelling ideas and practical insights.
Hey, cut me some slack, okay? My kids got me sick and my throat still hurts.
In this episode, we discuss, wait for it, online login portals.
Hey, they need to be called out and held accountable.
At least we talk about a couple of books we've read.
Which leads into an interesting conversation about the current state of film and TV exhibition.
All that and more?
No. There's not more. That's really all we talked about.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Episode 15. It might be our
Death Proof.
Maximum Overdrive.
Cars 2.
Airplanes 4.
The Terminal.
Stay with us. Just please.
Are you watching the new season of Alone?
No.
It only took 8 seasons. But someone finally dug a hole.
It's because of our podcast.
It is.
I told you what was going to happen. See? I told you.
And they were neither.
I told you to edit it out, and you didn't do it. I went back and I listened, and you said you told me that you did, and I went back and I was like, wait a minute, this is my secret. And sure enough, because of our millions of dedicated fans, now one of them. But that's good to know, because that means that somebody who listens to the podcast is on the show alone.
They listened to the podcast. They immediately applied. Got into the show, went out and filmed the show, and now the show's airing all in the last 6 months. There was a woman who dug with a skull jawbone. She didn't even have a shovel. And she got down like to waist height, and then built like a shelter above it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
I think it'll definitely keep her warmer as the climates get colder. But of course that's not the only thing. But it is interesting, just how much energy you burn trying to stay warm. So having a warm shelter can actually help you
survive
just because you're not losing energy. I thought that was interesting. Still to come, we talk the books we've been reading and some current trends for film exhibition.
But first, Thomas complains about login portals. You really kept that in this episode, huh? Okay, yeah. Stay with us.
Wild horse running north, seeing faces of the old waterside, moonlight, broken hands and heart of gold. Miles to go before I sleep, before I lay my head.
Yeah, July was crazy. It was busy.
Yeah.
Got back Friday. And of course Friday was kind of like a recoup day. And so really yesterday, Monday, was the first day kind of just back in the saddle. Of course, I got a cold, so couldn't enjoy the saddle.
You were driving, right, on your travels?
Or you
flew.
Yeah, we flew to Florida. So within July, there was a Tennessee trip, drove, and then Amanda and the kids turned around and went to Georgia, drove, while I stayed back and did the can pitch. And then they came back, and shortly after, we all flew to Florida. And then we flew back, and literally, we got back on a Saturday night, Sunday morning at like 5 a.m. Skylar and I turned around and drove to Tennessee again, a second Tennessee trip. And then I just drove back from that Thursday night. So we've had the weekend. And now I'm getting back into the saddle. So forgive me for the little sniffles. Bro, can we talk about how frustrating it is in 2021 that online login portals are still a shit show? I went through this when we were dealing with breast cancer, and all of the different portals you have to log into, the different websites, and how not only are they inefficient, poorly designed, poorly functional, but none of them are connected. And it's like, I got so frustrated, I almost wanted to devote time into inventing like a one portal solution that could somehow be elegant, well-designed, intuitive, functional, and connect these all. Got through that, forgot about it. Now we're entering public high school for Skylar, and I'm going through it all over again. There are 4 different login portals, one for the payment processing, one for the grades, one for sports, and then a 4th one I don't even remember. And like the one they released the schedule, we followed the steps to log in, and for some reason we did something wrong, and it is so damn frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, our kids are the same way. I mean, they've got like their Google Meets, or I mean, they don't do Google Meets now that they're back at school, but they still use them for like assignments, their Google, assignments thing. And then there's like Class Dojo, and then there's like My School Bucks, and there's like all these different things. And one of the things that this is like a very inelegant solution. It's not a solution to the problem, but it's like a fix. Is I use a program called LastPass. You ever heard of that?
No.
It's essentially like a password aggregator.
Okay. I've heard of the password, like a one password for all.
Well, what this is that you like install the plugin, or you have it like the app on your phone, and it autofills for you. And so you don't have to remember all of those passwords, or, I guess worse yet, like use the same password for everything. So you can have like legitimately strong passwords that you don't have to memorize. I mean, that's what I've started doing. And, if you have the plugin installed on Chrome, anytime you put in a password, it's like, hey, do you want to save this? And it's encrypted and all that. So,
hold on a second. Amanda's text me. We're texting me. She's literally trying to get a hold of the school to be like, why are we locked out of this portal? We can't access her schedule. We did everything right. It's less about the inefficiency of having 4 different portals. That is stupid. But it's the design of them. It's the inefficiency of them, and all of the issues that come up from them. And I'm curious, like what, like think about healthcare, think about public education, all these. It's like surely we can have a better solution. Like why is it? Why is it the way it is?
Because I mean, this is my opinion. We have all of our most talented, I guess what would they be? Computer engineers, software engineers. We have all of our most talented software engineers getting paid, mid 6 figures to try to keep you on a page in Facebook for 10 extra seconds. And so why would they go to work for somebody who could, where they could optimize customize the login portal for a hospital or a school?
So is that it? So is it like when the healthcare system needs technology, they have to outsource it and hire it, and the companies that they have access to actually produce this content are just inferior? Because it strikes me that there's all these like there are these privacy laws that is requiring these portals have to be kind of encrypted because of privacy laws. So there's some sort of regulation and oversight involved, at least in these healthcare system portals. And it just feels like they could get a better company to make these better.
And I don't think it's necessarily about the quality of the company. I don't know who's doing these things for them, but it's also about like how much can they afford, right? Because I mean, you're a good editor, say, but there's a difference if somebody says like, I can pay you for 2 hours of editing versus I can pay you for 20 hours of editing. It's like, all right, you're going to get the 2-hour editing job. Like it's going to be roughly sewn together, or you can get the one that's like very fine, very well assembled, like a good matching score, like all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, so there is a difference even within the same talent pool, but also I think, got to remember, like, there's a whole other side to that software that you don't see. Essentially, it's like your digital records, right? So that they can be shared throughout the entire system. Like UNC, they want everybody using the same software so that any UNC place that you go, any satellite facility, they can all pull up your records, right?
Right.
And like UNC recently switched to one, I think, called Epic a couple of years ago. And it was, I mean, obviously the switch was a disaster. I think that generally the opinion of it is high, but it's like complicated. You got to fill in all the forms. I mean, I like just thinking about what you're saying, the other side of it, I feel like it, is potentially way worse.
Well, it's funny. And that's a good point, because I've been asked by government entities about video work. And when you pitch them the proper budget to do it right, they're like, oh, we can't afford that. So what's the discount version? And they end up getting an inferior product when we're just talking about video. So I can imagine that it's similar with software design. Gosh, it's just maddening.
But what you're looking for, you're looking for one ring to rule them all. And I feel like we should know that that's dangerous at this point.
It's several-fold. It's the fact that I'm running into issues.
That was a Lord of the Rings joke.
Oh, I know.
Okay. You didn't even give me a giggle or a smile or a sigh.
I feel like that's a pretty common invocation, the one ring to rule them all. So I didn't realize you were, I mean, that's not really, I wouldn't call that a joke.
Fine. It's not a joke. Look, I'm off my game. It's been a while.
But I could envision an aggregator that is separate, that can, like, you log into this one dashboard and it's like I can see, for like the school, I can see all the sub accounts that I have. Oh, here's the payment one. Here's the sports one. Here's this one. And they all work. Part of what's frustrating is the fact that I've done their asinine steps to creating an account that's already like really clunky, because there's like a parent account that's then tied into the child account, which they already made. And I do all the things, and we log in, and it's successfully logged in. And now it says the school has disabled Skylar's access. And I'm just like, what? Like, guys, we can put a man on the moon, which we could have done 40 years ago. And that's, probably an apt observation that, the talented companies just are making money elsewhere. But God, you got to assume that there are some that have a sense of benevolence to, like, hey, let's improve, healthcare software. Let's improve public education software.
Come on. Let's be real about humans.
I still have hope that there's some goodness in some rich humans.
No.
Well, then hold me accountable when I'm rich.
And now look to the west, and I will carry on, and I will carry on.
All right, coming up right now, 2 books worth your reading.
And what the hell Disney, Warner's, and Paramount are doing at their movies? I said Warner's because Thomas told me to.
That's what it's known as.
Stay with us. No, stay with us.
No, stay with me.
I'll be here too.
Leave him, stay with me.
I'm still here.
It's interesting. I'm reading this book called Down and Dirty Pictures. It's about the 90s independent film scene, which is kind of, the beginning of American independent film as we know it today, or at least has been. I mean, the whole industry's changing. Peter Biskind wrote a first book about the 70s and sort of the new era of directors that came out of the 70s. Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola, and how that really ushered in this Scorsese, this great golden age of cinema. That book is well known. It's called Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. Then he did his follow-up book was about the 90s, and it really talks a lot about Miramax and Harvey Weinstein. This was published in the early 2000s, so it's interesting reading all about Weinstein and how much an abusive bastard he was just professionally. It doesn't touch on anything else because a lot of that was, if it was known, it was all hush-hush. But now knowing that he's in prison for, multiple rape, it's just sort of interesting reading it. But it's about Miramax and Weinstein because he was so pivotal in that decade. It's about Sundance and how Sundance kind of became what it is and how it's changed. And it's been really encouraging being reminded of how hard it is to make films. Like this
so
one.
That's not just you.
It's not just me. And you know that, but it's like some of these stories I was like, man, I not only hadn't had this level of pain, but the routineness of pain at the level that these known filmmakers are at, like Tarantino, James Mangold, Kevin Smith, and all these other filmmakers. It was like, even in success, it is such a traumatic business. Mm-hmm. Not just making the film, but then the selling of the film, and dealing with distributors who want to cut your film. This one woman talked about it took her 9 years to make one of her films. And it was just year after year trying to raise money. And it just didn't happen. She kept pushing it. And then she finally got it made. And I was just reminded of just how hard it is, how long a journey it is. I don't know. It was really encouraging. And even Quentin Tarantino's story, how he spent 3 years of his life making his first film, which he abandoned because it wasn't any good. It's called like My Best Friend's Wedding or something. No, that's a Julia Roberts movie. Anyway.
Directed by Quentin Tarantino, I think.
But he's, of course, he's working at a video store and, shooting, raising money here and there, saving his money, and then spending it on film, shooting over the weekends. And he got to the point, like 3 years into it, where he's like, this most recent footage is actually decent now that I've learned what I'm doing. That year one footage is unusable. And he was just like, this just doesn't work. This is not a good, worthy film to even finish. 3 years actually making a film only to abandon it. And then it took another 3 or 4 years to find the financing to get Reservoir Dogs made. Because that was something that he had a financing company, Live Entertainment, put up the $1 million or so to do it. And because he said, I don't want to do what I did. I don't want to save up and just make this myself. I need somebody to get behind me. So he waited it out.
Wow.
And he got a company. Now he did it a lot earlier because he was still in his 20s when he made Reservoir Dogs. And then that got into Sundance. That had a modest, that was, it wasn't even really appreciated in the moment. It didn't even win Sundance. And a lot of distributors thought it was too violent. Miramax ended up buying it, and they were like, you got to cut the ear torture scene. And Tarantino stood up to Harvey Weinstein. He's like, no, I'm not cutting anything. And really set the tone for their relationship. And they released it. And then, of course, he made Pulp Fiction, his second film, which is what really changed the world. But it was just it was just really encouraging of just feeling a sense of solidarity with just the to bring it back to kind of the tolls we were talking about last time, the tolls of the road of the independent filmmaker. So I've been enjoying the book, just kind of relearning 90s independent film industry and how much it's changed, how much the streaming industry has completely upended the whole game of independent film, and how there's still a buyer's market for content, but it's the streamers who are paying these crazy prices, and how theatrical exhibition and video exhibition has kind of just become, a loss leader, or just not even something that's contemplated. It's really interesting how much it's changed, and yet just how hard it is. I mean, and just the story of these companies, of just the executives. I mean, the verbal abuse, the screaming matches, that just how routinely these people are have mental breakdowns and become alcoholics or go check into therapy, just because it's this business is so hard. I don't know.
And it does not give a shit about you.
Yeah. It was inspiring because it's it made me content living where I live outside of the industry, and trying to be one of the good guys, certainly in a sense of just verbal conflict and how people kind of can talk to each other. But I don't know. It's been a fun read.
Yeah, sounds like it.
You been reading anything?
Yeah, I just read Dune.
For the first time?
Familiar?
Yeah, I'm familiar. I never read it. My brother read it, and I was always jealous he was reading novels that thick.
I was very intimidated of the book, I guess like what you're describing. Back in the time when I, would have kind of read this initially. And I then watched the film from, the 70s. And that I found it so impenetrable that I was like, I'm so glad I didn't read this book. It is there's no way I could have ever gotten through the book. And then, I saw there's the movies coming out, and I was like, let me give this another try. And it is one of the best books I've ever read.
Wow.
It is so good, so tight and well written. And he's so many times able to communicate things and evoke things so, easily, and with, so few words, able to evoke so much. But also, one of the other things about it that I noticed is how much has very clearly been taken from Dune.
In what do you mean?
How many sci-fi, what would now might be considered tropes, originated in Dune? Or at least they felt like they did.
When was the book written?
1963, I think.
60s. Yeah.
But again, I haven't verified that these things were created here. But in the reading of it, it felt like the ideas felt fresh and not derivative. Even though it was if you follow the stream back to its source, right? That's what it felt like. Even to the point that looking at, and I don't know all the right things, but the planet, the desert planet in Star Wars, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. With
the little smuggler people, and they're wearing those full body wraps with the goggles and things. That was just directly ripped out of Dune. Directly. And the worm, right? The big thing that they're gonna feed somebody into off of a hovercraft. The whole sandworm thing that started in Dune also. And so I'm putting George Lucas on notice. I'm sure that I haven't.
There was a Japanese film that he credited as the inspiration for Star Wars. What's it called? It's escaping me now. But I haven't seen that, and I don't think that was sand dunes and desert animals.
I mean, the thing that's interesting about Dune is that he does a really good. The author Frank Herbert does a really good job of mixing hard and soft world building, I think, because there are certain things. This is an intergalactic society, right? They move, or maybe not intergalactic, maybe interstellar, but either way, they are space.
What's the concept of the story in a nutshell?
So there is there's an emperor, I guess a galactic emperor or whatever, and he rules over in the same way that an emperor, of any empire would. But it's very Victorian in its kind of social structure. And so, there are dukes that are in charge of planets. and there is this one duke from one of the major houses, and he is sent to a planet called Arrakis, where there is this substance produced called spice, and it is like the most valuable thing in the galaxy, right? Everybody wants it, and it's super expensive, and you can only get it in this one place. And so he's sent there, but then he's betrayed by a rival duke, and like who destroys his family, and the son and and his partner. She's not his wife, but they are like forced to flee, and they're thought dead. So they go into the desert in this ultra harsh environment. Like everybody who lives there, they wear these suits that fully cover their entire body, and they reclaim the water. So the sweat, the breath, everything, because there's so little water on this planet, and they call them still suits because they distill the water back and you recycle it and drink it. And like even to the point that like when people die, they desiccate their bodies, pull all the moisture out, and then bury the body. And so people think that they're like weird cannibals, but really their whole thing is like your body belongs to you, but your water belongs to the tribe. And it's just really interesting kind of concept. So then it's essentially about like this this ducal heir reclaiming what is rightfully his. It's it's a story about family inheritance, betrayal, and all that. It just happens to take place in this spacefaring world.
How far along are you on it?
I finished it.
Oh, cool. Isn't there like a series? Is it?
Yeah, there's like I think there's an original trilogy, but but I think there are 6 total.
You have interest in the movie? Does it look interesting?
It does. Yeah. I mean, it was seeing the preview is what made me think, like, let me give this another shot.
Cool. Yeah, they keep pushing it. I guess that's coming out this fall, day and date with HBO Max, much to the dismay of Denis Villeneuve.
I mean, and a lot of actors these days as well seem to be suing people about this.
Yeah, gosh. Well, Warner's handled it horribly because they announced it in the trades. Oh, all of our 2021 releases are going to come out in theaters and on our service at the same day. And they blindsided all the filmmakers and actors, all of them who had box office bonuses tied to theatrical. So it was like, if you're going to change course, like, you have to talk to us ahead of time. The fact they were blindsided, it stirred up a lot of problems. And I think they ended up writing a lot of checks, basically paying off. All right, obviously the box office will be hurt if we are also releasing it simultaneously on HBO Max. So we'll pay you as if it performed X in the box office. Scarlett Johansson's making a similar claim with Disney.
Yeah.
But Disney didn't offer her. They just said, well, we paid you your salary and we didn't breach contract. And I think her position is you did breach contract because the thing that I get my bonus off of is kind of destroyed. They'll settle. But
I mean, I think they just handled it really poorly also. I mean, like the releasing how much she got paid, like that's a dick move.
Oh my gosh. And their tone. I actually was quite surprised that Disney shot back like they did, releasing her and then basically saying she's showing a callous disregard for COVID. And it was just sort of like, you're going to try to invoke like people dying of COVID. Like it really felt bad form from Disney. Yeah. And I think it only helped her case because she was doing something that actors do all the time, which is like suing for money owed. But for them to say what they did and said it publicly, I thought it was bad form for Disney, not acknowledging all sorts of things. Anyway, yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But it is definitely a whole new world of film exhibition. And definitely like the theatrical model is still proving valuable. The question does remain how smaller films will fare in this new landscape.
Yeah.
I think Dune will do well. The thing that they're seeing already is that films that release theatrically and on a streaming service. Now, what's interesting is HBO Max, if you're a subscriber, you can see it for free. Disney's day and date strategy is offering this $30 premium rental. But it's kind
it's not
of
a rental though.
It is a rental.
No, once you pay it, you have it. You don't own it in any like. I mean, this goes back to our Netflix thing, but like it's not like a 48-hour rental. Like you can.
My understanding is it was. Do you know to the contrary? Have you done it?
Yeah, just because
you paid once and it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there.
Okay, well that makes more sense, right? Because in a month it'll become free for all for the subscribers,
right? But if you disable if you stop paying for it, it goes away. Like, so you don't have any like long-term ownership of it.
That makes sense. So the $30 unlocks it as part of your subscription,
right?
I actually thought it was a 48-hour window. Okay, what they're seeing is films like Black Widow. They still have a really strong opening weekend, but then they fall off a cliff in week 2. And that's become a new pattern that is obviously not tied to, like, overall low theatrical would be tied to COVID, but a week 2 drop off, as severe as it is, would only be tied to the fact that it's available on streaming. So it's almost like the consumer's incentivized to go to the theater on opening weekend, but after that, it's like the lure has fallen off and the week 2 theatrical, which is kind of their case. They're like, yeah, these having a strong opening weekends, but because people can go watch it on Premier Access, it's dropping off on week 2 and the total box office accumulation will be hundreds of millions of dollars less than if it wasn't available. And it might only make $100 million on Disney Premier Access. Like they said, it made $60 million in its opening weekend. So it'll all work out. I mean, it's the same way that anytime there's change, especially when there's collective bargaining agreements, there's new norms of like how people get paid and what their back end's tied to.
It kind of, goes back a bit to like, the writer's strike from, how long ago was that, right? Like, when writers suddenly realize, like, wait, we're not getting paid for like this whole like range of exhibition, I guess, and like that just doesn't make any sense. And and that was, I think, driven by streaming also. But I think this is kind of like the next generation of those kind of things, because
especially if it does become a norm where big films both play theaters and then have a streaming option.
Yeah.
Like that may change. I mean, that may change. They could go back to a theatrical only window for a month before it shows up on the streaming service. We'll see. Theatrical will stay around. It's still too profitable for the bigger films because it does cost so much. And I think the experience is still a worthy one. It won't be like it used to be, but it never was like it used to be. I mean, the film that sold more tickets than any other film in history was Gone with the Wind. Like, it's all been downhill since 1936 as far as people showing up to theaters.
Yeah, it's not as novel anymore.
The inflation has caused new films to become the box office all-time grossing leader, but you can manipulate that by the price of a ticket. If you're counting tickets sold, the number of people who actually watched a movie in the theater, it's Gone with the Wind. TV was the first major hit to theatrical attendance, Then video, the ubiquity of video in the 80s was the next huge hit. And now we're talking about streaming. So it's like, it's changing, but it's still an experience that people want to have. But if you want to talk about, it's not like it used to be, it's like, well, it hasn't been like it used to be since the 30s.
Yeah, it continues to not be like it used to be every year.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, Disney, I think we talked about this, I think, during that Netflix episode. Disney was like, so like they paid a lot of money to fight, I guess, Sony, like, whoever was coming out with VHS, because they thought that it was going to, like, people were going to be recording their shit, and then it was going to, like, cut into their profits. And then they realized, here's this new thing that we can make money off of. And then they got behind it. I guess it's just, they just need to figure out how to profit from it. I mean, Disney seems like they're doing a great job cashing in. They just need to not bone their, all the artists involved in it. in the process.
Well, the name of the game for these companies now is building a library that they own. Because a library is forever. If you own a library, you can exploit it forever. So it's either acquiring things that they can own forever, but it's building its volume. It's building a library that they can then exploit. And if they have direct access to the consumer, which now they all do because of all these apps, it's like Disney Plus is direct. Yeah, they pay Apple TV or Roku or the platform a small fee, but it's something like 20% as opposed to 50% what you pay to theaters. So if you're beholden to a theater to show your film, you're paying them 50% for that exhibition. And so for these companies that can directly go to the customer, they want to build a library. So they're investing all this money into content, producing it, acquiring it, buying. Like Amazon just bought MGM's library.
Wow.
All these old properties that are owned by MGM, Amazon now owns. It's like the name of the game is just like they're just gobbling up these libraries of content. And I hope it just doesn't become, in 10 years, it's like 3 Silicon Valley companies own it all.
Probably.
Feels like we're heading that way.
I mean, I noticed we got Paramount Plus because we wanted to watch this funny show called Lower Decks, which is really silly and it's great. But then like kind of clicking through there because their interface changed with an update recently. And I realized like how much stuff they own, like all of Nickelodeon. Like, I was like, Are You Afraid of the Dark was in there and Doug.
CBS,
like,
it's Viacom. So these are all conglomerates. Viacom owns all of that. That's the conglomerate. And they own CBS. They own Paramount Pictures. Now, and that's the thing about like, what are we going to call our service? It was CBS All Access and then Paramount Plus. Because when you brand it Paramount Plus, you think it's just sort of the Paramount brand of films. But they're not going to call it Viacom Plus because they don't want to brand it some corporate conglomerate. But that's the entity that owns all this. Yeah. Now Disney's its own conglomerate. Disney's basically Disney's done an amazing thing
Pixar and all that.
Right, and nobody owns Disney. Disney is the one that owns all of that. So Disney has done the best because they have a brand name that is synonymous with a type of content that is still largely welcome in the homes, and they've gobbled up all of these other entities. Marvel, Pixar, Lucasfilm, you know what I mean? Harry Potter. So no, I think that might be Warner's.
Yeah, because they own Universal, right?
And now Warner's merged with like AT&T and HBO, so that's all one conglomerate. It's crazy, dude. It's just like, it's insane.
Are we having an interesting conversation now, or are we just ranting?
The city lights, where the dogs will find you, and that's alright. 'Cause I've got you. 'Cause I've got
At least we kept this episode short.
Right now, 2 picks. What's your pick, Justin?
I'm going to tell you. The Foundation Trilogy by Isaac Asimov, one of the greatest books of all time. And I always said, nobody can ever make this into a film. Have you heard of The Foundation?
Yes.
I pitched it to you, and I was like, this would be like so good, but like it'll never get made because the main character is not a person; it's an idea, and it spans thousands of years. And so every like little episode in it is like hundreds of years later. And
never say never.
Apple, they turned it into a TV show.
Everything will become a movie or a show.
But I like when I read this. When I read it, it was just Anyway, it's great.
Is it out? Have they released it?
No, it's coming up soon though. It's late summer release, I think.
Ted Lasso season 2 is coming out. I'm sure Ted Lasso is one of my picks for season 1. It's just a delightful, heartwarming comedy series on Apple Plus.
No,
but
never heard of it.
I don't know. Me and Skylar watched the Billie Eilish documentary, and she's a really impressive young lady. Her and her brother write and record amazing music that wins all the Grammys. And I don't know. I find myself kind of a fan of hers by the end of the documentary.
That's cool.
Because she's like great lyrically. She's got a beautiful voice, and Songs are smart, and they're very. I mean, she's pop, like she's on Justin Bieber level fame, but the music's so not pop music. It is just really smart. Like you would really be into it. And she's like, she shot to stardom at 16 and 17. I think she's 18 now. And also on Apple Plus. Her documentary's called like The World Looks a Little Blurry or something like that. And it's just the cameras kind of follow around for a year. It's a little pandering. It's a little coddling, the documentary and the people all around her. Mostly, her entourage is largely her family and her people. There's definitely like a coddling kind of feeling. There's a little pretentiousness to the documentary itself. But ultimately, it kind of wins you over, and her talent's really undeniable. And she's got the goods.
That's cool.
So, Billie Eilish.
Take my hand, don't look back, keep our eyes on the road. Take my hand, don't look back, keep our eyes on the road. The river runs high, the hair is
all right. Thank you for listening. If you made it this far, you're a fan, and we appreciate you. We'll try not to have an episode that low energy again, but we can't promise it. We're just human. We're just doing a human podcast.
Let me say this. If you've made it this far, just go leave a review and a rating.
We'll read it.
We'll read it.
Our music from this episode is Jude Moses. Go check him out. Jude Moses. What's his website? I don't even know, but the internet, you don't really need a website anymore. Just the music of Jude Moses is featured in this episode, so go listen.
If you want to stay connected to us throughout the month, you can follow our Instagram account at twofriendspod.
And go to twofriendswiththepodcast.com for the footnotes from this episode, links to any resources we've discussed, and email us, hey@twofriendswiththepodcast.com. Let me check our inbox. It is blowing up. Nope, just a whole bunch of spam from Backtrack. Justin, where can people go if they want to follow our company?
They can go to badtheologypictures.com or follow us on Instagram at badtheology.
And where can people go if they want to follow my films?
ThomasStory.com is my favorite website. I'm there every day. I make sure to mess up his analytics by going to some real filthy site first and then going to his.
We're going to attempt to resume our episodes every other week droppage because the summer hustle is ending. But the fall is beginning, and we're just two humans trying to live a life. So just, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
We love you.
Thanks for listening.
All right, just coming up,
right?
Coming up. Where are we? All that and hell.
Nobody's listening, so it doesn't really matter what we say.